The morning mist clung to Manhattan's towering spires, like a ghost of the city's industrial past. Dr. Lam Min adjusted his hard hat as he emerged from the Cathedral Parkway subway station, his geological survey equipment weighing heavily on his shoulders. The familiar rumble of the aging transit system echoed beneath his feet, but something felt different today. The vibrations weren't quite right. As one of the city's leading seismologists, Dr. Min had spent the better part of 2 decades studying the geological foundation of New York. The Metropolitan Transportation Authority had called him in after reports of unusual seismic activity detected by their monitoring systems. Small tremors barely perceptible to most had been occurring with suspicious regularity over the past month. The legends of the lost city beneath Manhattan had always fascinated him. Tales passed down through generations of subway workers spoke of vast chambers beyond the mapped tunnels of sounds that couldn't be explained, and of maintenance crews who had ventured too far and returned speaking in whispers about lights in the darkness. Most dismissed these as urban folklore, but Dr. Min had learned to pay attention to patterns others ignored. His first indication that something was amiss came when he reviewed the seismic data from his office at Columbia University. The waveforms were too regular, too precise. Natural earthquakes had a chaotic signature, but these pulses showed an almost mechanical repetition. It was as if something massive was operating far beneath the city's surface. The tunnels beneath the city were a labyrinth that stretched back over a century. Some sections dated to the original pneumatic postal system, others to forgotten subway lines that had been abandoned during construction. Dr. Min had obtained special permits to access the deepest levels areas that appeared on no official maps. His descent began at the 191st Street station, the deepest subway stop in the system. From there, he followed service tunnels that grew increasingly narrow and ancient. The walls changed from modern concrete to older brick, then to rough-hewn stone that spoke of construction techniques from a bygone era. As he ventured deeper, his instruments detected the source of the anomalous readings. The artificial seismic waves were stronger here, coming from somewhere far below. Then, in a tunnel that showed signs of recent collapse, he found it. A massive metal door easily 12 feet high and just as wide had been partially exposed by the tunnel's destruction. The metal was unlike anything he had seen before, with a surface that seemed to absorb his flashlight beam rather than reflect it. Strange symbols were etched around its perimeter symbols that looked both ancient and somehow technological. Dr. Min knew he needed help. This discovery was far beyond his expertise alone. Over the next week, he assembled a team of specialists. Ha Kiet, a brilliant infrastructure engineer who knew the city's underground systems better than anyone, agreed to join the expedition. Dr. Elena Morales, a renowned archaeologist with experience in urban excavation, brought her expertise in dating and analyzing ancient structures. Their first challenge was simply reaching the door again. The tunnel shifted and changed with new passages opening and closing, as if the underground itself was alive. Ha Kiet's engineering skills proved invaluable as he rigged temporary supports and found stable routes through the maze. Dr. Morales examined the symbols, while Dr. Min took readings with increasingly sophisticated equipment. The metal of the door appeared to be composed of alloys that shouldn't have existed in any historical period she could identify. The symbols showed influences from multiple ancient civilizations, yet formed patterns that were entirely unique. On their 4th expedition, they encountered the first signs that they were not alone. Subtle changes to their path supplies that had been moved, and most unsettling of all, the sound of machinery that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. It was Ha Kiet who figured out how to open the door. The symbols weren't merely decorative, they formed a complex lock mechanism. By pressing them in a specific sequence that combined archaeological insight with engineering logic, the massive portal began to move. What lay beyond defied every expectation. A vast chamber stretched into darkness, with walkways and structures that seemed to extend for miles. The air was fresh, filtered, and warm. Soft lighting emanated from what appeared to be bioluminescent panels along the walls. As they ventured into this hidden realm, they encountered an ecosystem unlike anything on the surface. Plants grew in impossible configurations, thriving without sunlight. Water flowed through channels carved with precision that spoke of advanced planning. The scale was immense, suggesting a population that could indeed number in the millions. Their first contact with the inhabitants came unexpectedly. A figure emerged from shadows ahead, human in form, but dressed in clothing that seemed to blend organic and technological elements. The person watched them with curiosity rather than hostility. This was Aaron, who would become their guide and advocate in the world below. Aaron explained in accented but clear English that their arrival had been detected, monitored, and debated for some time. The underground civilization was aware of the surface world, but had chosen isolation for complex historical reasons. As Aaron led them deeper into the underground city, the true scale of the civilization became apparent. Districts specialized in different functions, agricultural areas where food was grown using advanced hydroponics and controlled environments, industrial zones where biotechnology and engineering merged to create solutions for life underground, residential areas where millions of people lived in communities that had developed their own cultural traditions. The technology was astounding. Biological systems had been engineered to process waste, clean air, and provide energy. The infrastructure was self-maintaining, with organisms designed to repair and expand the city's systems. Information was stored and transmitted through bioneural networks that connected every district. Dr. Min learned that this civilization had originated centuries ago, not as refugees fleeing disaster, but as volunteers in an ambitious experiment to create sustainable human habitats underground. As surface cities grew polluted and overpopulated, a group of visionaries had created this alternative. Over generations, it had evolved into a complete society. But not everyone in the underground city welcomed contact with the surface. A faction led by older residents, who remembered stories of surface persecution and exploitation, argued for permanent isolation. They had the power to seal the entrances forever, cutting off any contact between the two worlds. Meanwhile, on the surface, word of Dr. Min's discoveries had leaked. An organization called Surface Guard, composed of security officials and concerned citizens, declared the underground city a potential threat. They argued that unknown technologies and populations posed risks that couldn't be evaluated. Surface Guard obtained legal injunctions to seal the entrances and prevent further contact. The situation reached a crisis point when seismic monitoring detected massive artificial earthquakes being generated beneath the city. Dr. Min realized that some faction underground was preparing either to seal all entrances permanently or to defend against surface intrusion. At the same time, Surface Guard was preparing to use explosive charges to collapse access points. In desperation, Dr. Min and his team became mediators between two civilizations, on the brink of cutting themselves off from each other forever. They shuttled between worlds, carrying messages and building understanding. Aaron proved instrumental in these negotiations. As someone who had always believed in the possibility of cooperation, they convinced moderate leaders that the surface world's environmental problems could be solved with underground technologies. The bioremediation systems developed below could clean polluted air and water above. The climax came during a meeting deep within the underground city's governing chambers. Representatives from both civilizations gathered as seismic activity reached dangerous levels. Dr. Min presented evidence that the artificial earthquakes were being triggered by Surface Guard's attempts to seal the entrances, which in turn activated the underground city's defense systems. Dr. Morales had made a crucial discovery. The symbols on the door weren't just decoration or locks. They were instructions for a sustainable relationship between surface and underground dwellers. The original builders had always intended for the two civilizations to work together. Ha-Kiat proposed a solution-controlled access points that would allow for exchange while maintaining security for both worlds. The engineering challenges were significant, but with combined resources and knowledge, they were solvable. The turning point came when Aaron volunteered to be the first underground resident to visit the surface in over a century. Emerging into daylight in Central Park, surrounded by media and officials, Aaron spoke about the potential for cooperation rather than conflict. In the weeks that followed, joint teams began working on environmental projects. Underground biotechnology was adapted to clean the East River. Surface expertise in renewable energy was combined with underground efficiency systems. Small groups from each world visited the other building understanding and trust. Dr. Min found himself appointed as the official liaison between the civilizations. His role evolved from scientist to diplomat to educator. He established programs for students from both worlds to learn about each other's societies. Ha Kiat led the engineering project that created permanent secure access points between the worlds. These new passages were marvels of both engineering and biotechnology, capable of being sealed in emergencies, but normally open for controlled exchange. Dr. Morales continued studying the historical connections between the civilizations. Her research revealed that the underground city had been providing subtle assistance to the surface for decades. Water purification innovations that had been discovered by surface scientists had actually originated below. Urban planning improvements had been suggested through intermediaries. The integration wasn't without challenges. Cultural differences led to misunderstandings. Some surface corporations tried to exploit underground technology for profit. Some underground factions continued to advocate for isolation. But progress was undeniable. Air quality in Manhattan improved measurably as biofiltration systems were installed. The underground city benefited from surface innovations in communication and transportation. Most importantly, both civilizations learned they were stronger together. Aaron became an ambassador, spending time in both worlds and helping others make the same journey. They established cultural exchange programs and worked to preserve the unique aspects of each civilization while fostering beneficial cooperation. Dr. Min often reflected on how the discovery had changed everything. The search for the source of unusual seismic activity had revealed that beneath one of the world's greatest cities lay another civilization, entirely, one that had been quietly solving the very problems that plagued the surface. The story spread far beyond New York. Other cities began examining their own underground spaces, wondering what might be hidden beneath. The relationship between surface and underground became a model for cooperation across differences. As the first year of open relations concluded, Dr. Min stood at the observation deck of the underground city's central tower, looking up through a vast crystal dome that provided a view of the surface miles above. Children from both worlds played together in the chamber below, their laughter echoing through the space. The artificial seismic activity had stopped, replaced by the natural rhythms of two civilizations learning to live in harmony. But Dr. Min's instruments still detected mysteries. There were other passages, other doors, other societies perhaps waiting to be discovered. He smiled, adjusting his equipment for another survey. The earth beneath their feet held more secrets than anyone had imagined. And now, with two civilizations working together, they had the wisdom and technology to uncover them responsibly. The legend of the lost city had become the reality of the found city. But more than that, it had become a bridge between worlds, proof that understanding and cooperation could overcome fear and isolation. In his final report to both governments, Dr. Min wrote, "The greatest discovery was not the city itself, but the realization that we were never alone. Beneath our feet lived relatives we had forgotten, carrying solutions to problems we thought unsolvable. The future belongs not to either surface or underground alone, but to both working together." The metal door that had first revealed the underground civilization now stood permanently open, its strange symbols glowing softly in welcoming light. It had become a symbol itself, representing the courage to step through barriers into the unknown, and the wisdom to build bridges instead of walls. Years later, when asked about his greatest achievement, Dr. Min would always answer that it wasn't the discovery of the underground city, but the relationships built between two peoples who had too long remained strangers. The real triumph wasn't in the technology or the solved environmental problems, though these were significant. The victory was in the children from both worlds, who grew up thinking it was perfectly normal to have friends who lived deep underground or high in skyscrapers, who saw differences as sources of strength rather than division, and who would carry this understanding into a future where the surface and depths were no longer separate worlds, but one world with two beautiful aspects. Hakiat often took his grandchildren through the tunnels he had helped secure, pointing out where the old barriers had been, and explaining how engineering wasn't just about building structures, but about building connections. Dr. Morales continued her research now, with access to underground archives that revealed a history far richer and more complex than either civilization had preserved alone. And Aaron, now an elder in both communities, would sit with young people from both worlds and tell them the story of the first meeting when fear nearly prevented the greatest partnership in human history, and how curiosity, courage, and compassion had prevailed instead. The underground city thrived no longer hidden, but proudly part of a larger human story. The surface city breathed cleaner air and faced its challenges with new tools and perspectives. And in the tunnels between them, the lights never dimmed, always ready to welcome travelers between worlds. Dr. Min's final contribution was establishing the Institute for Interlevel Studies, where researchers from both civilizations worked on problems affecting all humanity. Their motto, carved in both surface languages and underground dialects, read simply, "Divided we survive, together we thrive." The seismic activity that had started it all was revealed to have a deeper meaning. The underground civilization systems had been trying to establish contact for years, sending subtle signals upward. It had taken an earthquake, a collapse, and a curious scientist to finally break through barriers that were as much psychological as physical. In the end, the story of the secret underground city became the story of two halves of humanity, remembering they were one people. The population of 50 million wasn't a threat to be contained or a resource to be exploited, but simply neighbors who had been living just a bit lower than expected. And deep beneath New York City, in chambers that stretched beyond imaging, the lights continued to glow, the systems continued to hum, and life continued to flourish in ways the surface world was only beginning to understand. The secret was no longer secret, but the wonder of it had only grown with the sharing. The metal door that had once seemed so ominous now welcomed thousands of visitors each year. Its symbols had been decoded as a greeting. Welcome, surface dwellers, to the partnership our ancestors planned. The lock had never been meant to keep people out permanently, but to ensure they entered with intent and wisdom rather than by accident. As both civilizations continued to discover what they could accomplish together, they also discovered that their story was part of an even larger narrative. Other underground civilizations existed beneath other great cities, each with their own solutions to the challenges of human survival and prosperity. The age of hiding was over. The age of cooperation had begun. And in the tunnels beneath New York City, where it had all started, the lights shone a little brighter, welcoming all who came in peace to discover what wonders awaited when humanity chose connection over isolation, trust over fear, and shared future over separate struggling. The earthquake that had brought them together had been a gift, a signal, and a beginning. What followed was proof that the earth itself seemed to support those who sought to build bridges between its different levels, those who recognized that human civilization could exist beautifully, both in the light above and the engineered illumination below, and those who understood that the real treasure beneath the city streets wasn't gold or gems, but the promise of what people could achieve when they worked together. Dr. Min often returned to that first survey site, where unusual seismic readings had started everything. He would stand there, feeling the subtle vibrations that were now recognized as the heartbeat of a vast living city. The tremors no longer seemed mysterious or threatening. They were simply the sounds of life, technology, and hope emanating from below, and reminding the surface world that they were never alone. The greatest discovery beneath New York hadn't been the city itself, but the rediscovery of human potential, when isolation gave way to integration, when secrets became shared knowledge, and when the question changed from, "What are they hiding?" to "What can we build together?" And so the story continued not as an ending, but as a beginning, with two civilizations now walking forward together, one in the light and one in the deep, both reaching toward a future that neither could have achieved alone.